world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
About every summer, we meet for a trip.
Vacation has officially begun on Netflix.
To best enjoy your trip, we suggest the following itinerary.
I say we just wing it.
Wing it.
See where the wind takes us.
From best-selling author Emily Henry
Are you guys like a thing?
Oh, no, we're just friends. Platonic travel companions.
comes your next favorite rom-com.
Who wants to go skinny dipping? Alex does.
Vacation, Alex!
I love it when you get weird.
People We Meet on Vacation, now playing on Netflix. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
All roads lead to Rome, as they say. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of traffic on those roads in recent years. In the wake of the pandemic, the city has grappled with over-tourism. But in 2025, the year of the Holy Jubilee, there are more reasons than ever to visit. And yes, there will be more people, but there are many ways to avoid the crowds. Here with us today is Laura Itzkowitz, a Rome-based journalist who recently wrote a story about the Eternal City for Afar.com. The link is in the show notes. And in this companion episode, Laura takes us off the tourist trail. Well, Laura, welcome to Unpacked. It's so lovely to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're here to talk about Rome, and I know you've lived there for a long time, so I was hoping that we could start with just having you explain your relationship with the city. How did you wind up there, and what is it like all these years later?
How long have you got? I fell in love with Rome on my very first visit to the city, which was like more than 15 years ago now. During my study abroad year, I actually studied abroad in Paris, was a French major in college, but as many study abroad students do, I tried to, use that time to hop around Europe and visit other places. So my family came and met me like at the end of the school year, and we went to Rome, Florence, and Venice. It was a beautiful summer day in Rome, and I was walking on Via della Pace, which is one of the little cobblestone streets right around Piazza Navona. And I remember just looking around me and seeing all these beautiful, weathered, faded buildings covered in ivy, and all these very glamorous looking Romans in white linen, standing around or sitting and drinking at the cafes. And hearing them speak at the time to me just sounded like little operas happening all around me. And it was like a light bulb that went off in my head. Like, I just need to learn this language and live here.
And you're here 15 years later. What has kept you there all these years? Have you ever flirted with the idea of leaving or going elsewhere, even in Italy?
I spent 2 years living in Rome between college and grad school. So after that moment, I went back to finish college and picked up Italian 101. And then as soon as I graduated, I moved to Rome, signed up for a teacher training course to learn to be an English teacher. And so I spent a couple of years just kind of bopping around the city and, cobbling together a living, teaching English lessons to children and businessmen mostly.
Oh my gosh.
Which is a whole other story. But I knew that I didn't want to do that long term for my career. So while I was here, I started applying for some grad school programs and got accepted to a prestigious MFA program in New York. So I moved back, and then I stayed for another 6 years getting my career as a journalist off the ground. And in 2016, right when I was going freelance, I visited Italy again, and that's when I met my now husband. So
he's Italian?
Yes, he's Roman, 100% Roman. And I thought, let me see if I can make a go of this and go back to Rome and see if we can work out, as a couple, and if I can make this career work. So I moved back in 2019, and I've been here since then.
Well, since you have this front row seat to Roman culture, both living there and being married to a 100% Roman, I would love to get your thoughts on the personality, the soul of Rome. Like, how would you describe that at this point in time?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I love this. And I don't know if I can do this question justice because I don't want to generalize, of course, but my friend, actually, Elisa Valeria Bove, she once described Rome to me as a sort of mother figure. Mama Roma, she said, as this sort of like, you know, wise, sage woman who envelopes you in her warm embrace. And I think that's kind of a nice image, you know. Rome is a city that has been around for thousands of years. She's seen it all. She's lived through it all. She knows who she is and what's best for her. And she probably knows what's best for you, frankly, because she's an Italian mama. And she definitely wants to make sure you're well fed. And, you know, sometimes she's going to give you a little tough love because sometimes the city throws that at you.
I love that. That's a great answer. How would you suggest that travelers engage with that Mama Roma?
I think that just trying to have as much contact with real Romans, you know, as possible is always enlightening. I mean, for me, I always find those interactions rewarding, whether it's going to the little neighborhood restaurant where the owner is like this super Roman woman, totally no nonsense, you know, comes to your table and reads the menu off of a chalkboard and is like, okay, so what do you want?
Yeah. Would you say that Romans in general are no nonsense?
Yes, I think they are fairly no nonsense. Yes, definitely more direct than what Americans are probably typically used to.
Got it. Okay, so go meet the locals, have the local dinner. It sounds like part of that is like get out of the kind of main tourist hotspots.
Yes, definitely. Rome is a huge city. The population is, I believe, around 4 million, but in terms of the geography, it's so much larger than what visitors typically see. Okay, so visitors typically kind of spend most, if not all of their time visiting the Centro Storico, the historic center, which is the core, you know, all the main monuments, Piazza Navona, the Pantheon, Campo dei Fiori and the Jewish ghetto. And then you could consider the Centro Storico to be like the area even around the Colosseum and the Vatican, basically within the Aurelian walls, which were the ancient walls that fortified the city. But outside of those walls, there are so many other neighborhoods, and I still don't know all of them. I mean, I can tell you that to cross from one side of the city to the other by car would take you probably an hour. By public transit could easily take you 2 hours or more. So it's a much larger place than what people think. And even some of the more, I don't want to say satellite neighborhoods, but let's say the neighborhoods that are not considered Centro Storico, but are very close to the Centro Storico, like Testaccio and Ostiense. You know, that's a very popular area for food and nightlife. San Giovanni, San Lorenzo, which is like a student neighborhood where the university is, lots of cool bars and restaurants around there. I mean, these are neighborhoods that, let's say, the first-time visitor probably would not go to. And like for Romans, these are still very central neighborhoods. There's so much more even beyond that.
So in your story, you say that Rome has always been at a crossroads, drawing people from all over the world. But as we've discussed lately, mass tourism has impacted it in these really large ways. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, how has the city changed in recent years, and how is, say, the local government responding? Like, are they stepping in to help support Rome and tourists and locals?
I feel like in a way it's the mass tourism thing is kind of something that happens slowly and then all at once. Like, it's probably been gradually ramping up for years, but I feel like I've really noticed it in the last, let's say, since the pandemic ended and people have started coming back. And maybe that's because there was such a stark contrast because I was here for the pandemic and I was standing at the Trevi Fountain with only like 2 other people there. So, I mean, it was just unbelievable if you think about that. And now if you like look at videos on social media of the Trevi Fountain, it's just packed with people like almost all the time. And it seems like it's happening almost earlier and earlier every year as well. Like from definitely April, but possibly even March.
Wow, that is early. You know, I'd wanted to ask you if there is a shoulder season, like if there are times that you can go and dodge some of these crowds, but it sounds like shoulder season too is disappearing a bit.
Well, shoulder season is winter now. I think that winter is kind of the secret season here, to be honest. I actually love being in Rome in January and February because the city is so much quieter and you can get around so much more easily, both in terms of walking and traffic as well.
Climate-wise in the winter, what is it like?
I think the winters here are pretty mild, especially compared to New York, where I lived previously. Yeah. There is a little bit of rain sometimes, but generally it doesn't get terribly cold. So, I mean, you need a winter coat if you're walking around, but generally, like, I walk around with a winter coat, but don't have to close it. There are beautiful, like, bluebird days when the sky is clear and there's this really wonderful kind of soft winter light, which casts this lovely glow on all the buildings. So I love it here in winter.
Amazing. Have you seen the local government try to respond, or do you think that there will be any kind of like ticketing or, you know, some of these other cities where there's been such, you know, mass tourism, they have started to put those types of limits in place? Do you think that's something that we'll see in Rome?
Well, there are a few things which I noted in the story. So the Spanish Steps, for example, they banned sitting on the Spanish Steps back in 2019, I believe, which actually was pre-pandemic. But that was one of those places that would get really crowded. Like people would just sit and hang out on the steps and drink beers or hang out and talk to friends and stuff like that. So sitting on them has been banned for a few years now. Whether or not it's really enforced is a different question, you know. Yeah. Like I usually walk by nowadays and there may be some police officers milling around, but like if you're up at the top of the steps, they're not coming after you.
Yeah, interesting.
And then the Trevi Fountain, for example, now when you want to go to see the Trevi Fountain, you actually have to get in line and wait your turn in order to get up close to the basin. I mean, there have been rumors about possible fees, like tickets, in order to get up close to the Trevi Fountain. That has not happened yet. They did start charging at the Pantheon, however. Now, in order to enter the Pantheon, you have to buy a ticket. It's like €5. So it's not a lot, but, you know, that was, I think, a pretty big deal, especially because in Rome and in Italy, for the most part, churches have always been free to enter. The church is supposed to be a refuge for people where anyone can enter and admire the beautiful art, but also just like have a place to go if it's raining or if it's super hot in the summer and you've been walking around and you need to sit down. So these measures are a little bit controversial in some ways. I guess we'll see if they actually make a difference in combating this mass tourism.
Yeah, that's tricky because €5 might not be enough to dissuade people, but I also understand why they wouldn't want to raise it per that idea that the church is a refuge. Well, given all of this, how would you encourage travelers to engage with the city if they want to try and have a less crowded experience? It sounds like visiting during the winter could be a great plan.
Yes. I mean, visiting in the slower season for sure is a good way to do it. I think it's not that hard to get off of the tourist trail if you think that most of the tourists are concentrated around the Centro Storico area, right? So walking around Piazza Navona and the Pantheon, like there are going to be crowds. But even within the Centro Storico, there are places you can go, like small museums, palaces, other lesser known churches that are empty. Like this past weekend, I went to the Galleria Corsini, which is this beautiful museum inside of a former aristocratic palace in Trastevere, which Trastevere again is one of those like neighborhoods that is super popular, gets extremely, at times unbearably crowded, more so on nights and weekends, because it's known as sort of a destination where young people go out and drink and eat and all of that. But in this same neighborhood, you can go to Palazzo Corsini, or you can go to Villa Farnesina, which has incredible frescoes by Raphael on the ceiling. And these places are empty. I mean, Palazzo Doria Pamphili, which is right on Via del Corso, one of the main thoroughfares in Rome, one of probably the busiest street. This aristocratic palace is literally on that street, and yet you can just duck inside, and it has this beautiful courtyard with a cafe. You can sit and have a drink there, and you can go upstairs and visit this museum inside of this palace. It's basically like a miniature version of the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. It's just incredible. There are so many places like this. And then, of course, there are the neighborhoods that are just a little bit outside of the Centro Storico, which we started to talk about.
Is it worth going to see the quote-unquote iconic sites of Rome anymore? I mean, if you can have these experiences elsewhere, why would you necessarily wait in line to see the Trevi Fountain, right? Like, I understand historical and cultural draw, but do you think, especially for a first-time visitor who perhaps has not seen these things before, do you think it's worth trying to and fighting the crowds?
That is a really hard question, actually, because I don't think I can give a definitive yes or no. I feel like, of course, these are treasures, right? The Trevi Fountain is just unbelievable. And if you can see it without the crowds, it's amazing. But in order to do that, you have to go at like 5 o'clock in the morning, which, you know, some people,
nice.
some people will do. I have actually seen the fountain in Piazza Navona at like 4 o'clock in the morning once. And it was honestly one of the most surreal and magical experiences I've ever had anywhere. I do think that these places are still worth seeing, but it's hard, you know, knowing that going to them during these normal hours during the day, and they're so crowded, and you're like elbowing other people to try and get up close, it just kind of ruins the experience. I feel the same way about the Vatican museums, to be honest, and I really wish that they were managed differently, because the crowds are just so overwhelming. For example, I went with a couple of family friends who were visiting a couple of years ago in April. So not like super high season, but getting into it. And was on a guided tour with them at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And at some points during the tour, I looked around and I couldn't even see them anymore, because we were just like in a sea of people. It's just a nightmare, to be honest. And I've also been to the Vatican museums for the 6 a.m. tour with the clavigero, the key keeper, who is opening the doors, and have seen the museum completely empty. And that has been an unbelievable, incredible experience. I want to say everyone should be able to have that experience, but of course, that kind of thing is very exclusive. You know, the normal traveler is going to be going there amidst the crowds.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do talk about shoulder season and off season a lot in travel, but it sounds like off season within the day is maybe a smarter way to look at it at this point in time.
Yeah. Some of these attractions have either early or late opening hours. So I would say always check, because, for example, the Vatican tour at 6 a.m., that's like a very exclusive one that normally needs to be booked through a high-end tour operator. But the Colosseum also typically in the summer does night tours. And so I went and did that with a friend once who was visiting. And that was amazing because we were there after it was closed to the public, and it was just a small tour with an official Colosseum guide who brought us inside and down into the hypogeum, which is the area where all the wild animals were kept, basically, where the gladiators would walk through before they came up onto the stage. And also to see it at night illuminated is really special. So I would say definitely in terms of these big like bucket list sites and destinations, try and see if you can get in outside of the normal hours.
We'll be back with Laura's advice on avoiding culinary tourist traps after this word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by FX's The Beauty Official Podcast. Join host Evan Ross Katz on the official podcast for FX's hottest new series, The Beauty, taking you behind the scenes with its amazing stars as they discuss the show's most jaw-dropping moments. Featuring Evan Peters, Anthony Ramos, Jeremy Pope, Ashton Kutcher, Rebecca Hall, Bella Hadid, Meghan Trainor, Isabella Rossellini, Jessica Alexander, and Ari Grainer. Search FX's The Beauty wherever you listen to podcasts.
So Laura, there's this anecdote about finding authentic food that you shared in your story, and it really saddened me. You said that you'll see an Italian grandma standing in a window making pasta, which I think on the surface for most people would actually look like a very authentic experience. So how do you encourage travelers to find and identify, the quote-unquote authentic food experiences in Rome?
Actually, I hadn't even thought of that until I was interviewing Sophie Minkili for that story, and she mentioned it as something that she's noticed lately. And I thought about it. I'm like, yes, I have seen that too, where there are these restaurants, usually near the big major piazzas, that have these big windows where there is some woman just like making fresh pasta. And this poor woman, it's like a freaking zoo, it's totally not traditional or authentic in Rome. I mean, the sort of pasta grannies down in Puglia are super famous. And there, I guess it is like an authentic thing that these grandmothers would be standing outside of their houses making pasta in the street, because in Puglia in the summertime, it's really hot. So it's cooler for them. But in Rome, that's never been a thing, right? In Rome, there's not even this idea that fresh pasta is better. And that's sort of a misconception that visitors and tourists tend to latch on to. Like, oh, it's Italy, therefore fresh pasta. Like, oh, we can have fresh pasta. It's amazing. It's so good. And yes, like fresh pasta can be amazing, but there are so many different types of pasta, so many different types of sauces. And in Italy, the cuisine is very regional, first of all. So there's typically a sauce that pairs with a certain shape of pasta. And there are some that work really well with fresh pasta, like cacio e pepe, great with fresh pasta. That's a super Roman dish. But like carbonara, amatriciana, these are not dishes that Romans would typically use fresh pasta for.
What about takeout culture? In your story, you mentioned that there was a link between that and Airbnb in a problematic way.
Yeah, I mean, the takeout thing is a little bit more complicated in the sense that takeout has always been part of the culinary landscape here, I would say, because, for example, the fritti, these are fried things as a category. We have supplì, for example, mozzarella in carrozza, the fried zucchini blossoms. These are like typical street food snacks that any Roman would grow up eating, stopping into like a little frigitoria, for example, which is a place where they make fried things. Or pizza. Pizza, of course, comes in many shapes and forms, and one of them is pizza a taglio, which would be by the slice. Or even bakeries usually have at least the pizza bianca, which is white pizza. It's sort of like the focaccia, just the same dough, but without toppings, just a little salt, and that's it, basically all salt and olive oil. These takeout spots that have started to replace the little like neighborhood grocery stores in some neighborhoods in Rome. And that's a shame, of course. I mean, Rome has also always had a strong culture in terms of not only markets, but also shops. Like, of course, you have the baker, you have the butcher, but then, of course, you have the cheese shop and like the shop that sells salumi, right? So all the charcuterie, the prosciutto and salami and all of that. And some of these places are getting kind of pushed out. I mean, there still are some really wonderful historic ones, but like the tourists aren't necessarily going to go and buy a whole thing of cheese. They just want to go and get a sandwich, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not grocery shopping necessarily unless you're staying for a long period of time.
Yeah.
You know, one of the ways to potentially combat over-tourism is to take fewer trips and then stay for a longer period of time. So given all of that, what do you think Rome can reveal to someone if you stay beyond, say, a week?
Oh my God, so much. I think Rome is one of the most incredible magical cities on earth. It has, over 2,000 years worth of history. And then you can be walking around and on one corner see these incredible ruins that were there from the time of Julius Caesar. And on the next corner, there's like a really cool new bar or restaurant. And there are so many hidden gems as well that you need to take your time in order to seek them out and find them, like some of the museums and palaces that I mentioned, but also the churches, like, you can see the Moses by Michelangelo in the Church of San Pietro in Vincoli in Monti, which is just incredible. You can see frescoes by Raphael in the Church of Santa Maria della Pace. The Caravaggios, there are so many Caravaggios in different churches. Some of my favorites are in the Church of San Luigi dei Francesi, which is between the Pantheon and Piazza Navona. And then again, exploring a little bit farther, right, beyond these places, you can go spend time on the Appia Antica, which is incredible. The Appia Antica was the ancient Roman road. It was called the Queen of Roads. And, the saying, all roads lead to Rome, basically that was the original road. And it went from Rome all the way south down into Puglia. And so you can literally walk on those stones that ancient Romans walked on thousands of years ago and walk in the shadow of these ancient aqueducts. And that's another beautiful place where tourists don't normally go, but it's also a regional park. So Romans love to go there, especially on like beautiful spring days. On the weekends, you'll see tons of Romans hanging out and having picnics or walking their dogs with kids playing and everyday scenes in these incredible places.
Well, with that in mind, where would you recommend that someone base themselves to kind of experience the best of Rome? Or where do you recommend that like friends and family stay?
So it's funny. I always used to tell people to stay in Monti, which ironically Sophie was telling me is her neighborhood. And according to her, it's one of the neighborhoods that's been really gutted by Airbnbs. I mean, of course, we have different perspectives. She grew up there and she knew more of the boutiques, the old school places that a lot of them have disappeared. But I do still think that Monti is a really vibrant, fun neighborhood. It's the neighborhood that's just uphill from the Colosseum. So you can walk to the Colosseum within 15 minutes. It's just cobblestone streets and piazzas where people gather around, lots of bars and restaurants and boutiques by artisans. Otherwise, I think it kind of depends a little bit on the type of traveler you are. So, for example, San Lorenzo is kind of a more up-and-coming neighborhood, but it's definitely still quite gritty. So not the like charming cobblestone image of Rome that one would have in their mind. But like, if you're interested in good restaurants and some cool bars, like street art, graffiti, lots of artists, that could be a good place to stay. For someone who really loves a beautiful hotel, which I would count myself among them for sure. The area around the Spanish Steps and Villa Borghese and Piazza del Popolo is just full of very luxurious, fabulous hotels, from the Eden Hotel, for example, which is one of the historic Grand Dames, was renovated a few years ago and has a fabulous rooftop restaurant and bar. So you can actually go have your aperitivo while watching the sunset on the rooftop bar and then do the gourmet tasting menu at La Terrazza in the evening. I mean, that's fabulous. The Hotel de Russi on Piazza del Popolo, which is where my husband works. Full disclosure,
okay. Oh, really?
Yes. But it is one of the most beautiful hotels in Rome, and I'm not the only one to say it. It consistently wins awards and is always on the lists of the city's top hotels. That place, for me, has the most magical garden in Rome. It's like centered around this courtyard. The hotel itself is a historic building where Picasso stayed, and I think Nijinsky, the ballet dancer, stayed at one point.
Oh my gosh.
And
wow.
It's now part of the Roccaforte Hotels group. So it opened in 2000 and was one of the very early luxury boutique hotels in the city. Now there are tons of them, but that was kind of the OG. And even if you're not staying in those hotels, I still always recommend go have a drink, because you can go and sit in that courtyard and have their Stravinsky spritz, and I think it's 20, maybe 25 euros, which, it's not cheap for a cocktail, but it comes with this.
You're getting an experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
You're getting the experience, this incredible atmosphere,
Yeah.
and all the little snacks that they serve with it, which are also wonderful.
Would you suggest that people stay in Airbnbs in Rome at all? Or do you think for most travelers, a hotel is the best way to support the local economy?
I think definitely hotels are a better way to support the local economy. Airbnb really changed the character of a lot of the neighborhoods. But also, I would note that recently in Italy, a new law has been passed requiring hosts to actually be physically present to check people in. I mean, the pretext for this was, in order to increase security, and I'm sure there is an element to that, but I think it's also a measure to discourage people from just converting apartments and using a lockbox, because of course, if you can put a lockbox, then it's super easy for the host. They don't even have to be there. It's something that's been for sure like troubling locals to see how many apartments have been converted into Airbnbs. I mean, I have a friend who was living in Trastevere for over 10 years, and her lease ran out a few months ago, and her landlord decided not to renew. She thinks that they're converting the apartment into an Airbnb, like everyone else. And she looked and looked and looked because she really wanted to stay in her neighborhood in Trastevere, and she could not find anything at all, and moved to a different neighborhood across the river.
Yeah, that's sad. That is really sad. I think that's a nice segue into talking about this idea of etiquette and culture. So how can people be respectful when they visit Rome?
I think that Romans have the sort of politeness and pleasantries much the same way as French do. So when you enter a place, say buongiorno or buonasera if it's the afternoon or the evening. Another neutral greeting that I use often is salve. You can say salve, and that's just like a neutral hello. Ciao, of course, is used only with like friends or family that you're already familiar with. So if you're entering a store or a restaurant or whatever, buongiorno, buonasera. Other things, I mean, do we want to talk about the no cappuccino after 11 a.m. rule?
Lay it on us.
I don't know. It's probably kind of silly, but it really is a thing that I would say Romans generally still do abide by. You will probably get some funny looks if you order a cappuccino, especially after a meal. The idea is that after you've had a big heavy meal, you're having pasta and maybe antipasto or meat or fish or whatever, your stomach is already quite full. And then to put a cappuccino, which is like full of this rich milk, is just very bad for your digestion. That's what they say. Yeah. So instead, order an espresso or an espresso macchiato, which is my drink of choice. It's just an espresso with a little bit of foamed milk on top. And that's totally acceptable at any time of day.
Are there any other etiquette or maybe food mistakes that you see travelers making?
Yes. I mean, there are a lot of kind of unspoken rules in Rome and Italy, especially around the food culture, I would say. Definitely don't ask for Parmesan cheese on your spaghetti with clams. My husband, I don't know if he really does this or not, but he has told me in the past that when people have done that at the restaurant, in the hotel, he would just tell them, "Oh, sorry, we ran out."
Oh,
because it just pained him so much. The idea that people would ruin this wonderful dish of spaghetti with clams by putting cheese on it. I mean, it's a general rule in Italy that you don't mix fish and cheese. There are exceptions to this rule, but generally the idea is that these are sort of two strong elements, right? And the cheese in particular is a very strong flavor, and putting it on top of a dish like spaghetti with clams just masks the wonderful flavor of the clams.
All right, that's a great one. Is he a chef?
He's a waiter.
Okay, nice. What about dress code?
Dress code. I mean, Romans definitely dress sharp. They're very stylish dressers in general, I would say. So you're definitely going to stand out if you're wearing a t-shirt and a baseball cap, and definitely no flip-flops. Italians never wear flip-flops in the city, only at the beach. No athleisure wear either. You never see Romans running around town wearing yoga pants. Absolutely not. You don't have to be dressed up as if you're going to an opera every evening or something, but a nice pair of jeans, a nice top, maybe a blazer. And then, of course, the churches are a whole other question, because if you want to enter the churches, of course, you have to cover your shoulders and your knees.
Always have that scarf or that extra layer. That's what I remember from my church visits.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we can't talk about etiquette without talking about tipping. So what is the tipping situation in Rome right now?
So the tipping culture, okay, I have a lot of thoughts about this subject because my husband works in a restaurant. So generally the consensus or the idea is that tipping is not expected in Italy because servers make a living wage. Okay. I think that's not true. I mean, knowing how much they are making, I think it's not true by a long stretch. The average salaries in Italy are a lot lower than they are in the US in general. So I would say, again, tipping, it's definitely not the kind of thing where you absolutely have to tip 20 or 25% everywhere. That's not expected. But I still think it is important to leave a bit of a tip if you've had decent service, because a lot of the restaurants will write a line item on your bill for coperto, right? Which is the cover charge. But typically that money is not going to the servers. It's going to the owners of the restaurant. And the servers are probably making no more than €7 an hour. So,
yeah.
I mean, I frankly don't know how that can be considered a living wage, especially in an expensive city like Rome. So,
yeah, that's shocking. And if you don't have a huge tipping culture to help fill the gap there, so to speak.
Yes. So tips are very much appreciated. And I think that honestly, as good travelers, as responsible travelers, it is kind of our duty to leave a tip, because you have to consider that you're coming from a much more privileged place.
Yeah, that's really helpful to know, because I think the main thing is people don't want to offend, right? So like, for example, if it was Japan where it's just like truly rejected, but it sounds like there it is something we should encourage people to be doing more of.
Yes.
Especially travelers.
I think so. I mean, I think that for locals, it's not unusual for locals not to tip or to leave a very small tip. But again, locals are earning much lower salaries in general and coming from a different cultural place as well. So I do kind of think that if you're coming from the US and you're used to tipping, great, like leave a tip. I mean, if you want to leave 20%, leave 20%, and they'll be absolutely thrilled. If you want to leave 10%, they'll be happy with that. It doesn't have to be like a specific number or even a specific percentage, but it's a gesture that I think is appreciated.
So this year's the Jubilee, which takes place every 25 years. It's a Catholic holy year that started in December and will end on January 6th, 2026. So a lot of people are making religious pilgrimages to the city. What have you seen come about as part of that?
In some ways, it is a good moment to come to Rome. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the negative effects of mass tourism, but the Jubilee has brought a lot of improvements actually to the city. A lot of the monuments have been cleaned. So, for example, in between the Vatican and Castel Sant'Angelo, they built like a whole new pedestrian piazza that didn't exist before. That's pretty amazing. They cleaned up all the angels on the Ponte Sant'Angelo, which was the bridge that crosses from Castel Sant'Angelo over to the other side of the city, and that's wonderful. They have pedestrianized some streets as well. I believe Via Ottaviano has been pedestrianized. That's near the Vatican. But they've also been cleaning up a lot of the monuments in the historic center, including the Trevi Fountain and the fountains by the Pantheon and Piazza Navona. I mean, all these things have been cleaned up in anticipation of the Jubilee. So it is an exciting time to be here and see the city in sort of a new, cleaned up, spiffed up light.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's been lovely to chat with you, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you in Rome. You'll find a link to Laura's companion article on Afar.com, as well as links to her website and her Substack. We've also included links to the many hotels and museums we discussed. If you'd like to weigh in on upcoming episodes, subscribe to our newsletter Behind the Mic at afar.com/BTM, or leave us a voicemail at the link in the show notes. Next week, we'll be back with advice on planning your summer travels with Afar destination expert Mark Elwood.
One of my favorite secret places is Mackinac Island, which is Michigan's perfect, tiny, gorgeous piece of summer deliciousness. No cars, a grand hotel that's been open for decades, a chance to sort of step back in time in all the best ways. And I'm going to say that if you haven't been to Mackinac Island ever, this summer is the time to say, gosh. Say to someone from the Midwest, you know, can I come?
Yeah.
Or do you want to keep it as a secret to yourselves? And then book a little trip.
Ready for more unpacking? Visit afar.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're at Afar Media. If you enjoyed today's exploration, I hope you'll come back for more great stories. Subscribing always makes that easy, and be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platforms. It helps other travelers find it. And if you want to ask a question or suggest a topic for coverage, you can leave us a voicemail at the link in the show notes or email us at unpacked@afar.com. This has been Unpacked, a production of Afar Media. The podcast is produced by Aislinn Green and Nikki Galteland. Music composition by Chris Cullen. And remember, the travel world is complicated. We're here to help you unpack it.